Hello everyone, welcome to Ubud. As you know, that Ubud is not only a co-working space, but we always say that events is our main DNA, and so we have more than 400 events a year, and today you are one on our regular events called Bali Bungkus. For today we have Richard Ayling, who will tell us how to find your optimal flow. And I just want to give you some information about our other events. So tomorrow we will have members lunch together at Cantina at 12:30. If you want to join, just ask Kashfi. And also we will have breathwork. Hi, welcome. So on Monday we will have breathwork at 9:30 with the lovely lady there, Donna. So if you want to do like some breathwork before working or start your week, be here before 9:30. And then also other things that important is on August 29 we will have Pecah Kucha. And for this week, this month it's gonna be Indonesian All-Star. If you're also interested, just ask Kashfi and he will give you all the details. So now everyone is already here. Let's start. Richard, the time is started.
A round of applause before I've said a word. That's a good start. Thank you for that. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming. Like so far from the other room. That means a lot. That's cool. Now, does anyone come like from outside of Ubud, or is that allowed? It's not allowed.
Only
From home. Thank you. Thanks for coming. So my name's Rich. I'm a Wim Hof Method instructor. I'll go into more detail later about what that really is, but in short it means that I spend a lot of time mouth breathing and like sitting in ice baths. There are definite advantages to this, and lots of other people do it too. So today what I want to look at is flow states, and give you a sort of a clear understanding of flow from a perspective where I've studied. I want to talk about the Wim Hof Method and the overlaps between the two, which I've sort of found in my own personal practice. And I also want to give you guys some takeaways as well. So a kind of couple of activities where you can sort of talk to each other and sort of figure out your own flow states throughout your life, and figure out how to get more of them going as well. We've only got an hour, so we can't go super in depth, but that's kind of the plan for today. If you guys ever have questions, then feel free to jump in. But give me like 10 minutes just to kind of let me get my own like flow going, basically. All right, so this is me on a beach in Bali, looking pretty happy. It wasn't always that way. So just to give you an introduction to like myself and why you're kind of listening to me and why I'm talking, let's sort of jump back like 10, 12 years. I was working in England, where I'm from originally, in a bar restaurant, kind of shift work, not very happy, not taking care of my health or my what I was eating, what I was drinking, relationship not in a good place, kind of creatively blocked as well, and that's quite an important thing. I think a lot of you here will relate to that. I was a musician in the past, and I kind of realized that I decided that it was too much of an indulgence to kind of try and make music like an actual thing I could make a living from. So I kind of put that to one side, and all of these things kind of built up until I started kind of getting a bit sick. And I kind of ignored it, not thinking that these were the root causes. And long term, like I guess over about a year, I got really sick. And I'll spare you the details because some of you are eating, but use your imagination when I say that it kind of affects the bowel. It's called ulcerative colitis. It's very similar to Crohn's disease, which is pretty serious. Can you put your hands up if you don't know what an autoimmune disease is? And it's totally fine not to know that kind of thing. Not totally sure, cool. So your immune system is what kind of keeps you alive and keeps you going, keeps you fighting out illnesses, right? What happens is when you get a certain level of inflammation in your body through stress, as we'll talk about later, the immune system over a long time, if it doesn't calm down again, things start going wrong, and it starts kind of getting confused and actually attacking itself. And so that will kind of normally focus in on some area of the body or some organ, basically. So that's kind of what an autoimmune disease is. Not life-threatening for me, but definitely life-changing. So really had to... Good entry. I had to really work hard to manage my life so that I was able to eat and drink and function normally. I could have had my bowel removed, but I decided not to do that. I decided to try and fight it. Some people don't have that option. And over a long period of time of sort of self-study about nutrition and mindset and stress reduction, I managed to get myself to a position where I wasn't super sick anymore. I can come off the medication, but it was still within confines. I then got into self-development through the confidence that gave me. I don't need to talk about the self-development path to a bunch of people in a sort of co-working space in Bali, I think. But needless to say, like, you know, Tim Ferriss and stuff like that. I got the 4-hour work week and built my own company so that I could live this dream life, and it was great. But there's still something kind of missing, and my job was like, it was an English language school, and so teaching English became a bit like, I wanted to kind of teach something. And then I discovered the Wim Hof Method, ironically through the Tim Ferriss show. Started practicing this, and I'll go into what that means later, but very quickly got a surging kind of creativity, productivity, mood, and also my immune system like completely calmed down. So I felt like my inflammation was kind of disappearing completely, and then felt that I could maybe start eating and drinking and doing these naughty things that would give me a problem slowly but surely. And after a couple of months, my autoimmune disease had basically gone, and I'm completely free of any symptoms whatsoever. I can do what I want. So then I kind of quickly realized the potential of this method, applied to become an instructor immediately, realized that I'd be one of the first in the world outside of Holland, and here I am now, basically. Moved to Bali in January and started studying flow states. Has anyone heard of the Flow Genome Project? The Flow Genome Project. Or the book Stealing Fire. Is that? Cool, okay, all right. So these two guys have been studying flow states together, Stephen Wheel and Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler, sorry, and working with like top athletes and neuroscientists, and have basically put together this incredible kind of workshop and package to help you hack flow states. That's what I've been working on, and now I'm starting to see in my own personal practice, like I said, like a link between the two, the Wim Hof Method and flow states, and we'll look at that in a second. So that's where I am, and that's why I'm here to sort of talk to you about these powerful overlap and hopefully give you some takeaways as well. Before we begin, like, I want to ask you guys, what is your kind of understanding of flow or flow states? Can anyone give me any kind of adjectives or like experiences or ideas?
Easy.
Easy.
Yeah.
Flow is easy.
Yeah.
Cool. What makes you say that?
For me, it feels like when I'm in the flow, it's easy and I don't have to do anything. I literally just have to show up.
Nice. Nice. We'll come back to that point. Good. Anyone else? Your experience of flow is yours. There's no right or wrong. There are things I'm going to show you, criteria, but if your memory of a flow state or being in the flow doesn't necessarily match up to this, doesn't mean that, you know, your flow experience is no longer relevant, right? It's a lot of the time anecdotal. I was in flow yesterday. Were you? Can you prove that? It's kind of like emotional stuff as well, you know? But there's enough of an overlap. So any other ideas or experiences other than easy?
No blockage.
No blockage.
Presence.
Presence, nice, yeah?
Yeah, it's like a freedom and engagement with the moment. And after you are out, when you are outside the first stage, you just don't remember what you did, but it was perfect.
Yes, absolutely. Everything that I've just heard speaks to me and perhaps speaks to a lot of you as well. So, a slide cheekily borrowed, let's say, from the Flow Genome Project. Anyone want to sort of have a go at pronouncing this guy's name?
Mahali? Dr. Mahali something?
Dr. Mahali something. I'm sure he'll be fine with that. That's cool.
There is no flow in that name, I'll tell you that right now. That is total blockage.
She said Mahali or something? Mahali?
We could spend a long time on this, I have the feeling, but let's move on. Mihai, chick sent me high. Say it quickly. Mihai, chick sent me high. Chick sent me high, nice. So he's kind of, I guess, if we want to use the term godfather of flow, he's been studying and working with this for a very long time at kind of academic level. And the Flow Genome Project relates a lot to his research, which has been going for, like, you know, quite a few years now. So this is his kind of expression of flow. I think in simple terms, a nice way to explain it is that it is when you are the best version of yourself, right? When you experience this state where you just have these eureka moments, a shift in perception or understanding of a situation or experience. And maybe it's a kind of a, why didn't I think of that before? A revelation, something like that. It can happen when you're sat down at a computer coding, I've been told. It can happen when you're journaling, it can happen when you're moving quite a lot as well. A couple of really cool things to know about flow. Flow creates powerful intrinsic motivation by releasing incredibly powerful neurochemicals into our bodies. Things like reward hormones like dopamine, serotonin. We want to feel this again. Remember, these kind of hormones are addictive, very addictive. So the gambler is addicted to the roll of the dice, that feeling just before the roll of the dice, because he doesn't know what's going to come yet. That's the dopamine rush. That's what he becomes addicted to, actually. So think of, does anyone here surf? Any kind of extreme sport? Cool. It's like when you never need to motivate a surfer to get out of bed first thing in the morning to jump into the ocean. He or she feels that flow state, and it's just an intrinsic, automatic like motivation. I was addicted to surfing for quite a few years. I've kind of chilled out a bit now, but I can remember it very well. Flow cuts the path to mastery, which is roughly like 10,000 hours, by almost half. So once we get more and more flow states, we can actually remember things, we can learn things a lot quicker, which is a pretty cool tool, especially in today's sort of peak performance kind of world, I think. And people with the most flow are the happiest people on earth. Again, as I said, it's anecdotal, but this was a study done by the University of Chicago, and quite a large comprehensive one as well. And they found out that people who said they were in flow were also extremely happy, which, based on the definition, kind of makes sense, I think. So, you guys mentioned different sort of experiences or different ideas of experiencing flow, and here they are. This is kind of the lamest acronym in the world, but it works. Selflessness. You don't really know who or where you are in that moment. The sort of frontal neocortex shuts down and all ego goes out of the window for the moment. So you're not thinking about breakfast or like, does this person like me, and all this kind of crap, which is like essentially getting out of your monkey mind. Something that I think we can all benefit from. Timelessness. Someone said it earlier, it's like, I didn't even realize I was in that state. You're not even sure how long it lasts sometimes. It's a complete state of just being present and in that moment. Effortlessness, or ease, I think you said easy. Stuff just works out, it just comes to you. You could say from a higher channel if you were spiritual, whatever your label is, right? But things become incredibly easy. Words come out on the page, a turn on the surfboard just becomes automatic. And then richness, the quality of your experience as well, what you're writing, how you're surfing. Once your frontal neocortex shuts down, it doesn't have to worry about these kind of important, like, standard monkey functions, and then it can experience the really big stuff at a much, much higher level. Nice little graphic describing the 4 stages of flow. We start up here with struggle. Struggle is not something to avoid. Struggle is something we have to go through. Again, that could be sort of struggling and paddling on the surfboard. That could be like a really stressful time at work. If we run away from this, we're never going to get through it. So this is a really important part. Beta brainwaves, we've got cortisol and like adrenaline, essentially. The kind of stress hormones are produced during struggle. That's not rocket science. That's the stage 1. And at some point, we just kind of switch into a state of, okay, it's not always a choice. It might just be a stage of, okay, like, there's only so much I can do here. I have to accept that I can't achieve this. Or it might just be an essential release where you just break through that wall. Your brain state actually changes into alpha, which is a bit more active. Nitric oxide gets produced, very interesting. Then this flow state we're not always present in. Again, theta, gamma, these are the kind of really high performing brain functions that give us really good feelings. And dopamine, endorphins, etc. are released. So that's kind of where we want to be. But the part that people often forget about, which is critical, is recovery. Because your brain's just been through these 3 states, it needs to recover, it needs time to chill out again. So we can't just go, oh, more flow states, please. This means a lot of sleep. This means a lot of rest. Think what surfers do after they've finished their long surf of the day. They don't go straight back to work. Typically, in my experience, they kick back, they drink beer, and they kind of relax in the evenings. This will be my go-to reference, by the way. So that's where we're at, and I'll come back to this later. Flow states are very powerful things, but a really important message for now is to stop chasing them, to stop thinking, okay, this is my target for next week, this is going to be my goal. There are certain routines we can get in our lives in order to experience more flow states, and the breathing is one of them, but this is not something we can chase. Learn to struggle more gracefully. Approach this struggle phase as something that is going to have a reward at the end of it. It's more of a mind kind of perception or shift that we need to adopt. Beware the endless peak moments fantasy. We can't keep kind of expecting flow or the next day saying I'm going to experience the same thing again. Just like life is full of ups and downs, this is kind of how flow works as well. What we're trying to do is kind of just get it a bit more consistent. All right, I've talked a little bit about flow. Now what I want is for you guys to kind of just get into 2s or 3s, whatever is like comfortable for you, and just have a quick think about any flow states that you have experienced in your life. So try and think back to these 3 kind of areas. Childhood, adolescence, meaning kind of like 15 to 24 is how they gauge it, and adulthood kind of now. Try and think about what you were doing, who you were doing it with, and how did you feel as well. Sometimes it might be kind of hard to remember, I get that, so don't worry about it, but the idea is for you to try and dredge up some memories and actually share them. To give you some examples to help you, when I was a kid, my biggest experiences of flow were cycling, like mountain biking through the woods with my friends, most definitely. During adolescence, it was like playing bass in a band, sort of getting up on stage and doing that, perhaps doing some experimental drugs as well, but we'll leave that there. Cut that bit out. Adulthood, moments like this, getting up in front of people and actually talking, or leading breath workshops, or surfing as well. I don't do it as much now that I'm up here in Ubud, but these are my memories of them. I want you guys to try and think of some other examples and just talk and share your experiences. You've got about 5 to 7 minutes. Go. If you can't remember, then ask someone else.
I find myself being every day and then when I came to a point where I need to understand the way my heart is beating, responded to I could figure out which way I had to go and just like that. Tapping into my heart. Where you're coming with your spine, and I felt like it's like, oh, there's that one. We have like adolescents during my 24 hours.
not exhaustive time on it. That's getting through the I say now. It's okay, but very much. I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of other guy, he has children and family and stuff like that. Kill you. Finding a rhythm
And then when I decide that, I just like,
Yeah, that's my
learning
It's a little like something that I really think of like
Okay. Slowly come back to my world. Cool. Like, was that easy to think of some examples? Was it difficult? Anyone got any feedback on that?
we don't really discuss about whether it's in childhood or adolescence. Adulthood, we just like remember, oh, this is our moment. Yeah, when we got it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Silent.
I could only relate to recent experiences, like childhood and adolescence was like, maybe I need time to think, like I couldn't get that.
No. Everybody has a different response. Some people can remember their childhood vividly for some reason. These memories come up quite a lot, and then more recently, they're like, oh, I'm just kind of at the computer. I can't really remember. Everybody's different. I strongly recommend, if this interests you, to kind of like do this activity via journaling. Maybe take a picture of this and just take the time to just really sit and write. Like, journaling is a really powerful tool anyway, in terms of just the more you write, the more stuff just kind of comes up, right? It's quite powerful. So that's part of the course that I did. And yeah, I've got several pages of the stuff. And I was quite surprised what came up at the end. We've only limited time here, but just to give you a feel. I want you to spend 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, doing a second exercise, which kind of makes the first one more understandable. I want you to try and look for, if you can think of any, patterns in your life in terms of when you experience flow states, where, etc. Therefore, you can start to think to yourself, okay, when I was in flow as a kid is completely different to now. Maybe I can start doing those activities again. Not playing with transformers, but kind of getting outside if you don't do that so much anymore. So think back to those 3 phases as best you can, and look, think each time, where were you? Were you in the self, in the mind, thinking? Were you a deep thinker? Were you alone? Were you in culture, like perhaps at an art gallery, perhaps around other people at a concert or something like that? Or were you in nature? These are the kind of 3 typical places where we experience flow. It doesn't always have to be one, they can be different. So in each of these examples, try and think of where you were in that sense. Also, the trigger, was it physical? Were you moving? Were you doing something? That could be surfing, that could be sex, that could be punching something. It doesn't matter. Mental, again, were you up thinking? Were you coding? Were you writing? Or were you around other people? There is 4 different kind of flow profiles we don't have time to look at today, but some people are getting to flow typically more when they're around other people, like in a performance sort of sense. Some people are just on their own and they do it. Some people have to kind of be that adrenaline junkie moving around. So the more you can start to sort of think to yourself, I tended to experience flow doing this, then you can start drawing parallels and becoming more aware of what you're doing. So for me, I need to play a bit more music than I used to, because that was a big flow state experience for me. Just by playing it enhances the likelihood of flow states in my everyday life. And we'll give you more concrete examples of that later. So, turn back to your little group, and I want you to just take 2 minutes to each kind of try and come away with 1 sentence. Something like, I typically experience flow states in nature, or I used to experience flow states in nature, but now typically I get them in front of the computer. Something like that. Cool? As best you can. And again, this is a longer journaling type activity, but just as a takeaway for today, 2 minutes, off you go.
Being alone, you can just
I must be alone.
Maybe also when I do the stretching, so for me there's water like that
oh yeah. Or maybe hikes or
because my car was so I noticed the things that I do now, things that I try to teach one problem to the other. Yeah, you too. What's your problem? Then you two do your
Oh no, like I've always surfed the middle, and I want to surf the line. Like actually since I came back, I when you're sailing, like sailing itself has a purpose, you know, like you're just getting going forward. So it's just like oh, I should be doing this now. So you're already in purpose. So
Okay.
So I usually like the
Did anybody manage to come up with a sentence to take away? And they want to share.
Alone and in nature.
Alone and in nature. Exactly the same for me as well. Interesting. Anyone else?
For me, it was being very social and using one of my creative skills.
Cool. Which is
Photography, dance, or playing with flowers. Yeah, anything like that, really.
nice. Cool. Anyone else?
I identified a pattern. Yeah. Yeah. So the pattern is when I'm in transformation, I'm more likely to have flow experiences.
When you're in transformation.
Yeah. Like transforming what I'm doing in my life. That's when I'm experiencing flow.
I'm very glad you said that, because that helps me out a lot later with this this exercise explaining stuff when people are like, seriously? So thank you for saying that. Yes?
I think it has to do with the emotionalness, in the sense that when you are being honest with the arousal, the emotional arousal that you're having in your body,
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense. So the behavior that you are performing, it's current with all the layers of your.
Interesting. It's worth journaling. That sounds interesting. Nice. Thank you for sharing that.
I feel like I'm in the flow when I'm in a concert, because I don't know, I feel more happy, I feel more alive there with the people, with the crowd surrounding, like listening to the same song, like singing to the same song together. It's really nice.
Nice. Thank you. Everyone's got their own different experiences and kind of connections, right? It's kind of cool. All right, we're going to leave flow states briefly and make a really subtle segue into something completely different, but related. So, who's this guy? His name's underneath. This is Wim Hof. Who has heard of this guy? Little. Cool. Who is Dutch? All right. Who is Dutch and has not heard of Wim Hof? Yeah, he's super famous in Dutchland. Yeah, ich bin Dutch. I don't know where that came from. Yes, let's call it Dutchland for half an hour. He's super famous there for like having 26 world records for doing extreme things like sitting in an ice bath for 2 hours without his core body temperature dropping, for running across a desert without drinking any water and actually completing a marathon in like Arctic sub-zero kind of temperatures, hanging, etc., etc. I mean, the guy's into extreme stuff. This is not like a circus performance. These feats are to draw attention to the fact that he has complete control over his mind and his body and his immune system. Something that was thought physically impossible until he proved them wrong scientifically. That's kind of the great thing about this. This is not some madman, although he tends to play up to that sometimes. He's extremely skilled in what he's doing, and he's shown that in test conditions where he's been able to suppress his own immune system's response to an illness, which is, again, the autonomic nervous system, that part of our body that controls digestion, that controls stress release. We can't control that. We can't just go, all right, Give me some adrenaline, please. Can't do it. Not possible. Until he proved them wrong, and then showed after 1 week of training some guys that they could do exactly the same thing as well. So he's not a freak of nature. We can all do it. We just forgot how to. We've got comfortable in our lives. Kind of when it's cold, we put on something warm or the heating. They didn't have the option in the past to do that, and they had to regulate their own body temperature themselves. Yogis have been able to do it for quite a long time, but we never took them seriously. We just thought they were kind of strange. But this ability lies in all of us. Whether you want to, like me, walk to the top of a mountain in minus 17 degrees in shorts and be completely fine or not is up to you. That's kind of the extreme version of what is possible, but why is this kind of so important for the entire society? Well, it's kind of scientific in that we're tapping into deep levels of our physiology, our immune system, and also our endocrine system as well. This is the system that produces hormones. So through the breathing technique and through the cold exposure, they both induce the same response. And it's a controlled response of adrenaline and cortisol. So it's not a normal thing that was possible to do in the past, but now we can. The automatic response of that is the immune system just chills out. You can't be running away from a tiger and worried about having a cold at the same time. That's kind of how the body works. That's a nice analogy. So when the immune system gets suppressed for a short period of time and it comes back up again, it's like a reset, a complete reset. And so an overstimulated immune system is going to calm down again. People with depression and sort of out of whack levels of hormones are going to feel fine again too, and studies have really shown this. After a couple of months, people with PTSD have felt fine again. There's there's many studies or examples of people with illnesses like mine that have been able to heal themselves without medication. My favorite example is one of the other instructors who walked to the top of this mountain with me. He had multiple sclerosis and he was blind in one eye and it was deciding to face off in the other direction. He was given a 20% survival chance on the medication he was taking, the same medication his father had taken and already died from. He learnt the same method as me, practiced it for months and months and months, and now he's fine. He still has multiple sclerosis, but to look at, you're like, are you serious? And his eyesight's absolutely fine again, and he walked to the top of this mountain with me. This is insane. The possibilities to self-heal through this kind of stuff are no longer limited to monks sat in caves for like 30 years and stuff. Really, really cool. Why it's so interesting for like the entire species is that the inflammation I talked to you about, the inflammation that is caused from stress, when there's not a balance in our bodies between sympathetic fight or flight stress levels and parasympathetic rest and digest. If you do yoga, then you'll hear about this all the time. If there's not a balance and it's sympathetic all the time, inflammation builds up, like in my case. Inflammation is at the root of practically all known chronic diseases. Take your pick. So you think, wouldn't you, that this is quite a powerful tool in order to reduce inflammation before it even begins. So even if you're a bit stressed or you have a headache, you don't have to go to these extreme diseases. You can relax on a daily basis, and it's super powerful. This is not just like a cool biohack where we can sort of learn to relax or even stimulate ourselves at the beginning of the day. This is a much deeper journey if you want to kind of go that far. I've been doing the method for like 1.5 years, and some of the things that I've experienced and being able to control my own response to stressful situations are incredible. I was in Lisbon last year and I was just walking up the street in the evening, and then some guys kind of like were walking up behind me very aggressively, shouting at me, and I just felt the tension rise up my shoulders and the adrenaline go doof, doof, doof. Okay, here we go. And then I just went, that was instinctive as well. I just kind of took a breath and then immediately felt everything calm down again. And I just stopped and turned around. One of them was still like after me, and I just said, can I help? And he's kind of shocked that I wasn't freaking out. And then, do you have a cigarette? I was like, no, I don't smoke. Sorry. Just sort of went on like this bizarre conversation. And then he kind of trying to give me a hug. Portuguese, I don't know. But he sort of gave me a hug and he's like, all right, cool, man. Like, all the best. Walked off, and then he's taken my iPhone out of my back pocket. What the hell, you know? again, excuse me, walked after him, nice and calm, like, give me my phone back or I'm going to call the police. Which makes no sense. Like, how am I going to do that? He didn't clock onto that part either. Wasn't the sharpest of guys, and just was like, "Oh, I haven't got it." And it just sort of calmly just started searching him, and got someone else involved. It's like, this gentleman has stolen my phone, and I would like you to help me, please. And eventually, after a couple of minutes, he was like, "Sorry," and just got the phone out and just gave it back to me. We shook hands, and then parted ways. This is like Winnie the Pooh or something, you know? It was just like, and I walked up the hill going, what just happened? Why am I not shocked? What was that experience? Where's the adrenaline rush, you know? It was a complete subconscious kind of response. When you go deep with breath work and stuff like this, you really start to program at cellular level, and your body retrains itself to not only breathe more efficiently during the day, but much, much deeper things happen over a longer period of time. Very cool. Now to flow. Let's go back to our cool little chart again. Well, I think it's cool. This struggle phase at the beginning is what I would relate to the breath work. We do a lot of kind of deep breathing, and we actually get a kind of, we release exactly these hormones. This is the kind of controlled response of the stress hormones as we increase our breath. We're doing it quite fast and quite deep, let's say. Then we go to this release phase. This is related to sort of the longer breath holds on the out breath, which are extremely relaxing. The flow state then doesn't kick in a Wim Hof method always. I'm not saying that, but this is definitely the same the same hormones are produced during this phase of relaxation afterwards. And luckily, I did this talk at Dojo on Monday, and two friends of mine I hadn't paid any money to backed me up and said, yeah, I do this all the time and I get into flow. And that was really cool. They're not here today, unfortunately, but that was a nice little thing. And then this recovery period is, as I said, then your body starts to retrain itself with the new kind of oxygen you've taught it to use. So over time, like, you can start to sort of build up a much better relationship to your body, and then flow states I've experienced a hell of a lot more since I've started to do this method. Stephen Kotler, one of the guys who wrote Stealing Fire, behind the whole Flow Genome project, he talks at length, and you can see it on the internet if you want to Google it. I think it's Joe Rogan podcast. He talks about having Lyme disease, which is serious disease, serious illness. It becomes fatal when it gets to the brain. I mean, he could hardly walk. He wanted to commit suicide until one of his friends forced him to come surfing. They had to walk him to the car. He got in the water, and like, his body was not in a great shape, but suddenly muscle memory took over. He used to surf in the past. He got up on the board, experienced a flow state, and then he talks beautifully about just being panoramic vision and everything changing. He did 4 of these kind of flow state, like, surfing moments, and then was in bed for like 2 weeks and had to be fed food and was super sick. But he thought, hang on, that was something. And he chased this as best he could, and over months and months and months, cured himself of his Lyme disease. Why? Because of because of exactly the same hormonal releases that happen in the Wim Hof method. The struggle phase, as I talked about, he went through that, the release phase, the flow kicked in, and then the recovery too. All of these are exactly the same hormonal releases. This is my kind of personal discovery. I can't speak for the Wim Hof method or the Flow Genome project. This is my discovery, and since I've realized this overlap, I've been playing with it a lot. The cold exposure is the second part of the Wim Hof method. The third is mindset. I haven't really got time to speak about it too much, but it speaks for itself, your attitude to these things. The cold exposure is kind of the same idea. So in Germany, they call it Wechseldusche, like kind of alternating between hot and cold. You know, everyone knows that there's a sauna and a cold plunge pool. This is not revolutionary, but exactly the same sort of things happen. Anybody done like a cold exposure before, like taking a really cold shower? And a cold shower in Bali doesn't count, by the way. Anyone? A couple of people, cool, all right. You're training your body again to kind of, all the blood sort of goes up to the core to keep the core elements warm. And then after a while, when you feel warm again, then the blood moves around. This is like the hypothalamus part of the brain kicking into gear And you're retraining your body, to be much more efficient with this process to keep hot and cold. The more you do it, the healthier you become, the more white blood cell production there is too, which fights off illnesses. Damn it. And the more of this experience. Imagine getting into a cold plunge pool like the Champuan Spa, if anyone's been to it, in the top of Ubud, not far from here. If you're not used to it, what's the first thing you feel in a very cold environment? Dumb question, yeah. Thank you. I'm going to say it like that next time. Yeah, cold, shock. Your body's like, get me out of here, right? Sometimes this gasping reflex, not good. You learn to train your body over time to just go into the cold water, holding your breath above, always. And getting into a state where you can completely control your body's response to this. It's profound. Same stress hormones telling you to get out of there, you can then use to get into a flow state. You can use to feel extremely peaceful and relaxed. The ice bath is the extreme example of this, but anyone can do it. The Wim Hof Method workshops that I run, with the ice baths, I can take any of you through this experience where you'll get into a freezing cold ice bath for 2 minutes. And I'm not going to say you're going to enjoy every second of it, but you'll be fine. I'll get you into a state, it's a bit like Tony Robbins' kind of fire walking, you know? You'll get into a mental state where you're ready to do this, and then you'll come out and everyone, apart from one big tough German guy who's talking a bit too loudly, everyone except him wanted to go back in a second time. It's a very powerful, empowering, cathartic experience, and you get a bunch of hormonal kind of releases as well. It's a very nice thing. So that's the Wim Hof Method. That's the overlap that I see between flow states. If you've got any more, that's really important.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I've seen other netbooks blow up if you change into that because of something.
Oh, that's, sorry, I thought that was his. Yours.
All right, let's speed this up. That's the overlap. If you've got any questions about the Wim Hof Method, etc., and you're interested in doing workshops, then just ask me at the end. Flow triggers, again, something to explain, to help you kind of think, well, how can I get more flow in my life? We don't always have to kind of be doing extreme sports to experience these states anymore. There is a flow camp where you can get in these crazy apparatus and be thrown around to experience the same thing without the kind of the physical danger that jumping off a cliff entails. But on a normal level, not all of us want to do that kind of thing, and there are ways in which we can start to increase the same senses in our lives. Not the best focused slide, apologies for that, but when they talk to people who did extreme sports, they divided it into 3 sections. Deep embodiment, that contains like somatic cognition, which is just that, this kind of experience of weightlessness, of G-force experience, all the kind of physical things you'd experience doing that kind of stuff. Intrinsic motivation, we covered. This kind of feeling of like, I want to get out of bed now to go surfing because I love it so much. Hedonic engineering, this sense of being in the body and experiencing perhaps slightly altered states that ayahuasca or mushrooms or cacao or whatever your drug of choice is. High consequence, so that idea of this is a pretty serious thing. Mortal stakes, like we can do other things to make us more aware of our own sense of being, sense of life, without jumping off a cliff now. Examples coming. Instant feedback, like how truly aware are you right now of the relevance and significance of what you're doing in your daily lives? Or are you just kind of going through the motions in order to get somewhere else? Being present is an absolutely critical factor in experiencing more flow states. Rich environment, big nature. Getting out into nature is for a lot of people a big trigger. You get out into nature, suddenly your sense of ego just dissipates. I mean, going out into nature, at least I'll speak for myself, gives me a sense of awe, gives me a sense of wonder, of possibility. My daily life is completely out of the window for a minute. And I think it's kind of a cool thing for human beings to do once in a while too. That's kind of where we're from. And we live in these kind of concrete boxes, and we walk up to each other on the street and we say, hi, how's it going? Who are you? And unless you're in Ubud, the general response back in Europe is kind of like, ah, God, what do you want? You know, it's a bit weird. Right? That's not too far a stretch, I think. What are you trying to sell me? That kind of like, whereas go into the woods, walk your dog or something, bump into that same person and go, hi. It's kind of a different experience, I think, right? Radical novelty, that's a cool one as well. Like how much novelty, how much newness do you have in your life? Are you always in routine and doing always the same thing? Or are you going through changes, transformation? The more transformation, the more change, the more novelty you bring into your life, the more you're challenging your brain to come out of its comfort zone, deal with new situations, and actually, yeah, one day you'll experience more flow states as a result. Some examples of things that you can do at different levels without jumping out of a plane if you don't want to do that. Looking at peak arousal, how well do I think I'm managing my fight, flight or freeze instincts, these reactions to things? You know, if I go up to punch you, or how do you react to this kind of stuff? Terrible example. Do one thing this week to put you in a more alert or attentive state, to actually be present and like think about how you respond to situations like this. A mild one would be breath work, putting you in presence and like seeing the different things that it brings up. It doesn't have to be a spiritual kind of journey in Ubud all the time. There is normal breath work, again, maybe that I facilitate, that isn't full of omming and mantras and stuff if you don't want to go that way. A medium way to do it, to step out of your comfort zone, would be to do some karaoke if that's not your normal kind of thing. Or do a Toastmasters kind of speech. That has taken me to a higher level of communication with everybody. Like last November was the first time I spoke in front of anyone, and I was a gibbering wreck. It was impossible. But you learn, you progress by experiencing and thinking, wow. The spicy one would be something like a bungee jump. Has anyone done anything like that, or jumped out of a plane? Or yeah. Do you regret it? Good answer.
No.
Incredible experiences, right?
Got my whole family to do it with me. Kick my mom right out the door.
Just years, like, we'll never like that food. Fair play.
I fall asleep
After jumping out of a plane?
After, yeah, or after like intense, like extreme stuff, like I pass out, basically. Yeah,
Wonder
like
why, you know?
Excessive.
Yeah, it's a big shock for the system. I mean, like, doing some breath work, you probably feel tired or maybe energized depending on the breath work. Jumping out of a plane's like, is there any more extreme thing you can do? Base jumping, stuff like that, then these are firing on levels like they're not used to, right? Unless you do it kind of every day. No. That's cool. All right, let's jump into radical novelty. How much unpredictability or newness is there in my life at the moment? Do one thing this week just to increase that. I mean, the more you introduce newness into your life, the better. This is going to sound ridiculous, but brush teeth with the other hand. Or, someone said on Monday in Dojo in Canggu, use the mouse with the opposite hand, right? Just kind of see what happens. You're just reprogramming your brain. You're setting up new neural pathways. This is just like, who can stay present the whole time they're cleaning their teeth? You don't even think about it. It's just a mundane thing you've done your whole life. Just a simple shift like that. It's super simple. Watch what happens. That's the point. Watch what happens and be mindful. Take part in a new workshop, something you wouldn't normally do. Just learn something new. Just give, even if you think it's nonsense, put it on like a sweater, like you've done with this workshop. And if you think, yeah, nice guy, but take the sweater off at the end, you know? Just approach it with like that and think, that's kind of new, that's interesting. Does it resonate? That's not the point. Just be open to newness. Spicy, go on your own, maybe, to a quiet part of the island that you don't know anyone. Be with yourself, see what happens. Be open to experience. I mean, that's a whole bunch of these things put together at the same time. Last one, embodied cognition. This is like the kind of the physical aspect. Without jumping out of a plane or whatever, what can we do here in Ubud or wherever you're from to give yourself a bit more physical stimulation? Assessment, 1 to 5, like 1, I'm not getting any, okay, let's do something. Yoga, this is probably the best place I can think of to do it. Something simple like that. And Hatha yoga, I'm big into Hatha yoga. This is more about the mind, and it's kind of the framework for the Wim Hof Method. Your asana sets you up for the breath work, sets you up for meditation, and great things happen in your mind. It's revelations, insights, that kind of stuff. That's the idea. Medium, acro yoga, this beautiful experience where you meet someone else and suddenly you're on top of each other and there's profound trust being developed. It's also a sensory thing because you're being held up like this. It's pretty cool. Trampolining is close to it. Spicy. Anyone done like a flotation tank before? Sensory deprivation, yeah. I fell asleep, it was lame. Doesn't work for me. Some people are astral traveling and tripping and stuff. How was it for you?
I was just relaxing. I wasn't from another planet or anything.
Some people are, I don't get it, but you know, everyone's got their own thing. So these are just examples, like figure out something for yourself.
Are there tanks in Ubud?
I don't know. I
They're
know
setting
this.
some up, I know, but they're not ready yet.
Cool, okay.
There is Watsu, which is water shiatsu taught by a guy named Michael, typically at 5 Element, which is kind of similar. Pretty nice to do.
There's one in Canggu. I know that. I can give you the guy's number if you want. It's pretty cool. You have to just squeegee all this like weird water off your body at the end, but whatever it is, give it a try. Flow states don't come unless you kind of do something different in your life to activate them. The Wim Hof Method is a really powerful method that's changed my life, and just for health reasons, but also give me access to all this cool stuff. So, with that in mind, I do have a workshop, breathwork workshop, on Sunday in Paradiso. If anyone's interested in that, I'm not going to hard sell, that's not why I'm here, but if you are interested in that, then come talk to me afterwards. So, thank you very much for your attention. I think we're on time as well. Yeah, cool. And if you would like to get in touch with me or find out more about any of this kind of stuff, take a picture before my Mac dies. My address, my website, and all my handles and social media. This is the Flow Genome Project where I kind of studied the flow stuff. The Wim Hof Method speaks for itself. This, if you want to get involved in breathwork or the Wim Hof Method in Bali, join this group. I run it and I post everything that I'm doing so people can keep in touch with that.